Hello and welcome to the Midweek Fix with me, Jamie Home. I hope you're all keeping well and have been enjoying the Euros as much as I have been. I think it's fair to say there's been some pretty decent games since we last caught up. So tonight we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the storylines that have come out of the Euros, as well as some of the breaking news within domestic football. So with that in mind, I'm delighted to say joining me tonight, we have Phil Egan from Off the Ball Sports. We have journalist Dion and making his Trippers debut is sports writer Ryan Baldi. Gents, great to have you on. Ryan, welcome. How are things?
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here.
Good to have you on, mate. So you're going to tell us a little bit about your book later on, but I'm going to come to you first, Dion, because I want to kick off with the Euros, because I've had a bit of a love affair, or a battle, I should say, with international football as a whole. And to be honest, it's not something that has ever got me overly excited. Certainly since the days I was a youngster, it's just not been the same since. I think club allegiances have kind of taken over. But I have to say, this tournament, it's absolutely blown me away. As I said, I think international has a bit of a bad rep. But from your eyes, just how good has this tournament been so far? Because it's kind of surpassed any expectation I had going into it.
Yeah, I think it's been great. Like, I think something we've had a lot in tournaments recently is quite a good or very good group stages, and people get very excited. And then once the knockout games come around, that seems to just disappear very quickly, and they settle down into very cagey, very boring matches. Where the fear of losing kind of overwhelms everything else. But with the knockout games, with the last 16 games, and in particular, I guess, the games on Monday, but I think, Saturday's games, Sunday's games were good as well. But I think Monday's games obviously were so exceptional that seemed to, the dynamics of the group stages just seem to kind of accelerate into the knockout stages, which really makes it good, because you can't have a great competition if it just falls apart when you get to the knockout stages, when you get to the huge games. And I think part of it as well is, I do think some of it is to do with the fact that there are weaknesses in the teams. Some of the teams aren't very, I thought, like the Denmark-Czech Republic game, it wasn't like you're not looking at phenomenal teams, but it just makes for exciting football. And it has been exceptional. And as I said, without sounding like a broken record, I think Monday is the point where everyone would go, like, it's sort of transformative, and everybody then is looking at going, this is an exceptional tournament.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say about the standard of the football, because that's something that's kind of been thrown at the tournament a little bit. And I think from your side, Phil, I mean, when you sit and watch the games,
sorry, I should have said Holland, Czech Republic. Sorry, Jamie, not Denmark.
No worries, mate. No worries. Yeah, when you kind of look at it, Phil, do you kind of share Dion's sentiments in terms of the quality of the football? Or are you on a different side of the fence?
Well, I think we're obviously being entertained. If you didn't enjoy Monday, then I can't do anything for you, because that, for me, that 5 hours was some of the most unbelievable sport I've ever watched in terms of international football. To have games that, going into Monday's games, I thought Spain, Croatia, two teams that like to keep possession. This could be quite cagey. Obviously, Spain had scored 5 in the previous game, but we know Morata isn't exactly clinical, and Croatia haven't scored that many goals. So I thought, yeah, this could be cagey enough. Then, obviously, it was an absolutely crazy game. France, Switzerland, you think, well, okay, France won the World Cup. They just got it done. Think back to how they beat Germany earlier in the tournament. And then that game just was crazy as well. So yesterday wasn't as good, but there's a mix of, obviously, you've got entertainment and you've got quality. So not necessarily the quality has been at the highest level, but certainly we've been entertained. And I think there's a few factors. Obviously, we've been starved of football with fans and an atmosphere. We've been watching sterilized football for the last 16 months, where we've been trying to convince ourselves it's good because some of us watch the games with crowd noise and it seems like it's legit, but it's not. You see what happens yesterday. There was footage going around of when England went 1-0 up. I saw a journalist had posted the fans jumping around, just limbs going everywhere. That's what football is about. Whereas the last 16 months, you're looking at players running to a corner to celebrate in an empty stadium. I mean, most of us have played in empty stadiums, and it's great crack and all to play in them, but professional footballers want the buzz of the crowd there. And I think towards the end of the season, when fans started to come back in, it definitely got the interest perked again. And we've waited 5 years for this tournament. I've always enjoyed tournament football. I know what you mean about international football can get a bad rep because some of the qualification campaigns could be absolutely dreadful. But these are the things you have to go through to get to the tournament. And then that's the main event. So next time, say in September, when the World Cup qualifiers come along and you think, geez, this isn't great, just think ahead to the prize at the end.
Ryan, there's a few comments coming in about your jersey there, mate. Can you just clear up what jersey you're wearing? Oh, you're on mute there, mate. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Sorry, yeah, it's the LA Clippers. I'm a big Boston Celtics fan, but I've got my Kawhi Leonard LA Clippers jersey on tonight. So yeah, I'm sure a few people asking.
What have you made of the tournament so far, mate? Were you like everybody else on Monday on the edge of your seat? Because as Phil says, it was one of the best nights of football I think I've had in a long time. It
was one of those nights where every 5 minutes your jaw is just dropping further towards the floor, wasn't it? Because something else was happening. There'd be an incredible goal, like that Benzema goal, with the first touch for that. Then Pogba goes and bangs one in the top corner, and you think, okay, France are here, they've arrived, they've put everyone on notice. But then 10 minutes later, we're into extra time, and they're struggling. They're looking fatigued, and Kylian Mbappe's having a nightmare. I've really enjoyed the entertainment. The quality of football, like you guys have said, has been really great, and to have the fans back. An aspect of it that I'm finding really fascinating as well is it seems to me that there's kind of two different generations sort of converging in this one tournament. You've got the guys on the way out, like the Luka Modric's, the Ronaldo's, some of the Italian guys, Chiellini and so forth. Even guys like Hazard, who are probably slightly past their peak now. But then you've got the emerging generation who are here as well. So you've got these players in one of their last chances of international glory, and then you've got this new generation like the Mbappes who wasn't quite able to step up, like all the young English players who are coming through. To see them really thriving as well, it's been really interesting to see that dynamic at play is something I've really enjoyed.
Dion, a couple of the lads touch on something there around fans being back in the stadium. How much do you put? Because look, it's been well documented on this podcast over the course of last season that I got in a bit of a hump with Premier League football with no fans and VAR and the direction that the game was moving. Whereas for me, it's very much seemed like a lot of that nonsense has disappeared. It feels now like we've nearly got proper football back. Is it, whether it's the fans, VAR isn't seeming to infringe as much on the games. How much of this entertainment and excitement do you put down to having fans back in the stadium?
Oh, I think it's huge. I think it's a massive thing, and I think it's a massive thing in terms of our engagement too. As Phil said, like we all pretended that we were okay with what we were watching. Like
just happy to have it back.
But actually, I think at times, like I did say at some stage last season, and I felt like last season's Premier League and last season's football will be forgotten quicker than any season in history, because once crowds come back, people won't want to be reminded. I believe actually with the whole coronavirus thing, and you see this going back in history with the flu Spanish flu epidemic and all this, that people actually stopped talking about it the minute it was over. There was very little written about it, and I think it's such a grim time, and it's such a it's a tragic time for lots of people, but it's also, if you're lucky, the best you're having is a really, really boring time in the pandemic. It's just been incredibly boring, and people want to get out of it, and football was like that. And we all put up with it because it was just marginally better to have it than not to have it. But to have it back now the way it is phenomenal. I think people are engaging with it. You look at even like in Ireland, without Ireland being there, and the viewing figures for it are huge. Like, there are really lots of people are watching it. And I think that is because just that energy and emotion and happiness you get from seeing the crowds. And obviously there's been some standout games where the crowd and the communion of the crowd with the supporters, like Denmark, Russia being the most obvious example because of everything. Like, that was, I think everybody was just engaged by that on so many different levels because of what we've been through, because then people saw what happened with Christian Eriksen, and the two factors combining, that you had this crowd in Copenhagen on such a special night for Denmark, has meant that people are really engaged with it in a way that they haven't been. And you don't get, if you're a casual, okay, a lot more casual fans watch tournaments anyway, especially in the countries where that are involved. But if you're a casual football fan, football without crowds, those games aren't something you sit. Like, how many times did you? Like, I had this experience so many times last year, where it's a game you're looking forward to because you have the historic memory of what this fixture is, and then you sit down to watch it. Like Spurs Arsenal or something, and you sit down to watch it, and it's Spurs Arsenal in an empty stadium. You're going, yeah, I can't do this. I can't. Like, I will do this, but I won't. And so.
I nearly felt guilty sometimes, though, Dion. I was like, I'm a football fan. I have to sit here for the 90 minutes and watch this game because that's what we do. But after 20 minutes, I was having this internal battle with myself, thinking this just isn't the same.
Yeah, and I think for people who aren't that engaged, this is a tournament then that actually re-engages people. And I actually believe as well, in an Irish context, it's been hugely significant in terms of the public mood, because you look at what's happening in sport in Ireland, and there's 100, 200 people at matches in huge stadiums, and it's kind of ridiculous that we haven't kind of got any kind of functioning outdoor system for anything. Forgetting about all the other stuff that's happened, but the outdoor sporting arenas there's been no real faith placed in them, and then people are. And I actually think governments and politicians aren't plugged into something like the Euros the way the people are. And then the people are watching Denmark, Russia, and then they're looking at what's happening in their own country going, well, this is crazy. This is Denmark. This isn't like some crazy country. This isn't Viktor Orban's Hungary. Like, this is sensible, rational Denmark that are letting people into their grounds. Why have we got 100 people in a 30,000 capacity stadium? So it's had a huge effect in ways that I think people don't really, or some people don't even understand.
One of the things that I've kind of had a battle with is my son. He's 9 now, 9 years old, and trying to get him to sit down and watch a full 90 minutes is a challenge at times, because we've mentioned it a few times on this podcast before. They're a fortnight generation now, and ultimately what they're doing is they have a really short attention span. So I'm trying to ultimately get him to sit and watch the full games. And what I've found is, now that we're into the knockout stages, the kind of risk reward that we're seeing, particularly, I think it was the Croatia game, and you mentioned it before, Phil, about it being some of the best entertainment you've seen. When you get into knockout football, it's just different, isn't it? You've got 10, 15 minutes to go and a team's 1-0 down, and they start throwing the kitchen sink at it. And I know I was sat there with my son, and you could see that the game was building. You could see that Croatia were throwing more people forward. You could see that something was going to happen at the end of the game. And then ultimately, when you get those 89th minute goals, you couldn't script it, could you?
No, and the thing about those two games as well, you had two teams 3-1 up with 10 minutes to go, and two teams that you would think would be able to see out the game, and then they get caught out. And I suppose going to the younger generation, this is something, obviously, it came up actually with Florentino Perez was talking about this crazy European Super League and how the younger generation don't watch 90 minutes anymore. And one crazy idea he had floated was maybe shorten the games. Now, I don't think it has to be that drastic, but because all the production of something like the Premier League, somebody can miss a game, but they can sit down and watch 3 minutes of highlights on YouTube. I get it in work. Some people, when you see people in the office the next day, and I'm not saying in our sports department, but other parts of the office where
you're going to name and shame there.
No, definitely not. But there is certain people that would say, no, I just saw the goals, I just watched the highlights, and you can't judge a game on highlights. But if we get entertainment like we did on Monday, then everyone's going to watch football. It's still such a popular game worldwide. You mentioned VAR. VAR has been a lot smoother. Unfortunately, when the Premier League season starts back, you'll remember why you hate VAR, because the Premier League officials will be back and they'll have the lines out. They're a bit thicker next season, but they'll still take an age to do it. I think the beauty of VAR at the Euros, the majority of the times, the decisions are done quickly. And that's all we want, because football is meant to be fluid, and you don't want breaks. Rugby obviously is always compared because they bring technology in, but those players, they kind of like the break because there is a lot more set pieces in rugby, whereas football needs to be played at pace. That's the way you want to play it. And if there's a lull, if there's break and play, then the sting can go out of the game. And I'd be interested to see how VAR works in the Premier League when we come back. But it's worked quite well so far at the Euros. I was a fan of it after the World Cup going into the Premier League, but then after the way they've used it, I haven't been impressed by it, and it's just almost taken the emotion out of the game. But then again, that could also tie in with the fact that I felt the emotion was gone out of the game playing in empty stadiums as well. So, you can see now we're obviously heading into the quarterfinals. The stakes are getting that bit higher. You saw yesterday with England and Germany, that was what I would call a cagey game. But because of who it was, we sat there and we were intrigued by it to see who'd blink first.
I think one of the other things, Jamie, just on that, on the games and why, like, VAR obviously has, the way they've used it has been much better. I also think a significant thing has been the number of substitutions, because like it's added to an element of kind of anarchy. Like if you look at Croatia, Spain, like Croatia made 6 substitutions. Like it's more than half the team were replaced, which we only ever see normally in like international friendlies. There was that time when, the Sven-Goran Eriksson would bring on 11 substitutes in the second half, that kind of thing. And it would just totally break up the pattern of play. But now you're seeing it in international tournaments, that they're making these huge amount of changes. And that's got to, and Spain made 5 in that game. And it's got to have an impact in terms of the cohesion and the compactness, if you like, of teams, that they've got practically a half a team is different at the end of the game than the beginning. So I think there's a good reason for doing it, and the players are tired, but it also, I think, has made games more open as well.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think that was used well last night when you look at the England-Germany game. And that's where I kind of want to go to next. And I'll come to you on this one, Ryan, because Gareth Southgate has had a lot of critics. England are never too far away from the news. And Southgate has certainly got a lot of stick for albeit he's negative, he's pragmatic, whatever you want to call it, whichever side of the fence you sit on. He used his subs fantastically well last night, on reflection, with hindsight. I'll hold my hands up. I was not a fan of the starting 11 that was put in place. I certainly didn't hide that viewpoint on Twitter. Any team that sets up with 7 defensive-minded players, for me, I'm not a big fan of. But on reflection, when you look at that, what have you made of England's tournament so far, and particularly the result last night?
It's been sensible, which is probably, if you're going to use one adjective to describe Gareth Southgate, that would be it, wouldn't it? I think everybody second guesses him, but I think he's doing a good job. People get frustrated at the conservatism of it all, because they want to see, you want to see maybe Saka put at wing back and add an extra forward into that team, which is not an unreasonable opinion to hold. But I think we've seen through the years that conservative football wins tournaments. Even going back to the great Spain side of the mid 2000s and early 2010s, they were a very conservative team. They just did it in a different way. They were conservative with the ball. They won most of their games by a single goal. And at times they weren't the most thrilling to watch, because they would dictate the play of the game, dictate tempo, and slow things down to their pace, and play the game on their terms. I think England have done that in a bit of a different way, by having some stifling tactics at time, or using their pressing in different ways at different levels of the pitch to offset what the opposition are doing, which can lead to a kind of disjointed feeling to the game. It can feel like the game is quite low in quality. But so far the approach is working. They're winning games by small margins, so that means you're going to question how sustainable that is going to be across the tournament. It only takes one major error at the defensive end, and you're in trouble. But yeah, like I said, conservative football tends to win tournaments. We saw that with France. The amount of great attacking players they've got, how often under Deschamps they've been very conservative. Even the great Brazil team of 2002, when they had Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, and Rivaldo up front, they still had two defensive midfielders behind them. I think in international football, there's just an inherent sort of risk-averse philosophy that pervades, because, like we've talked about, the stakes are so high, the tension is so high, and one mistake and you're out, and that's your dreams crushed for another 2 years or another 4 years, depending on the tournament you're going for. So, yeah, like I've been critical, just as everybody else has, just as my group of friends have on our WhatsApp chats. We've all got our own lineups. We all want to see an extra attacker in there. We all want to see a Jack Grealish in there. But I think it's also interesting to think about not only the starting lineups but the closing lineups. Particularly as it relates to international football and tournaments, because having game changers like a Jack Grealish or a Jadon Sancho, I think we'd all like to see more of. With that ability to come on and run at tired legs, is a really handy tool to have in the back pocket. And it's something that England haven't always had in abundance. That kind of level of attacking threat in such depth. I don't think in my lifetime, I don't think I've seen such quality and depth in the attacking position. So there are always going to be good players who miss out, but equally these are players who can come in and change a game. If you look at what you're going to close a game with as much as what you're starting a game with, then I think you can see there are a lot of options and a lot of weapons for England to use, and I think Southgate so far has used them fairly well.
Phil, do you think then, his selections last night were justified by the result? Because I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And let's say that Muller puts his chance away. That game is the perception of that game is completely different. England ultimately go up the other end and get the second goal, absolutely fine. But I think when you set out your stall to be so defensive, was it just a case of Southgate saying, look, let's just get through this game? We can be a little bit more expansive now with the likes of a Ukraine. You'd look to freshen it up potentially with a Jordan Henderson coming in, and maybe a Jack Grealish will get, in my opinion, his deserved start. But do you think all in all now the decision that he made was justified, or do you think Southgate seems to have 9 lives and just keeps rolling on?
No, it's purely it's results driven, isn't it? And you mentioned the Muller chance, but what happens if Timo Werner? I know Chelsea fans have been saying that all season. What happens if Timo Werner puts away that chance and they're 1-0 down? Like, Gareth Southgate is so cautious that it's almost it's ballsy, because you look at the team selection, and let's be honest, it's not a great Germany team. So, if the way he set up the team yesterday, if Germany beat England yesterday, Southgate is under unbelievable pressure. And he's under pressure anyway. Just think of the Croatia win. The next game, the 0-0 draw with Scotland, they get booed off at the end. They obviously had qualified before the Czech Republic game. They get the job done there. And, they've beaten Germany. This is seen as a big win, first knockout win over Germany at a major tournament in 55 years, a big name. But say, for example, they went out now on Saturday night and lost to Ukraine, and he went cautious. To be people calling for his head. So it's purely down to results. I'm sure he's justified, but it's a game of fine margins, and you can say that most teams that win a tournament will have moments in a tournament where things get a bit hairy for them. You think back to even Germany winning the World Cup in 2014. They obviously hammered Brazil in the final, but Argentina had chances in that final. Higuain missed chances in that game. The narrative obviously is that Germany dominated that World Cup and they were worthy champions. So what they're doing and what Gareth Southgate is doing, it's working at the moment. You would imagine it'll work against Ukraine because he can go back to a 4-3-3. That's the way Ukraine will set up. I'd imagine Mason Mount comes back in because, you know, he was isolating. He wasn't training with the squad. He could have been brought in yesterday. That wouldn't have been an issue, I don't think. But I would imagine Mason Mount comes into midfield. He might decide to take Rice or Phillips out, both on yellow cards. Yellow cards don't get cleared until the quarterfinals. And then maybe he starts Jack Grealish. I thought Saka started well, and he was justified to start the game after his performance against the Czechs. But now maybe Grealish gets his run on the left-hand side. And you can throw Sterling over to the right-hand side. Harry Kane is always going to start. I thought he was pretty poor yesterday. 2 touches in the first half an hour. There was one stage he went down in the second half, and Southgate asked him, was he all right? And in my head, I was wondering, was Southgate thinking, you know what, it wouldn't be the worst thing.
Make this easy for me. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. He's undroppable because he's the captain. Now he's scored. You have to play him, but he doesn't look sharp at all.
No, I think you're dead right. And Dion, I was going to come to you on the Harry Kane situation, because is there a conversation to be had there? Because like Phil, I was watching that game and it looked like he was running, pulling a fridge. You know, he was stuck in treacle as he was moving around the pitch. He wasn't pressing. He wasn't overly sharp. He wasn't actually keeping the ball. He wasn't taking the ball in. He wasn't occupying defenders. He just didn't really seem to be doing that much. I think it's kind of suited him at Spurs a little bit because he's been able to drop off into the pockets, receive the ball, turn, and then he's got willing runners in behind him in the likes of Son. And I think that was probably the plan for England in a way, you know, with the likes of Saka and Sterling in around him, is that they would run in behind. I think Southgate alluded to that in his press conference afterwards. But he just seems like a man that's either A, unfit, or just painfully out of form and confidence.
Yeah, but I think the train is now a runaway train. There's no catching this train now. There is no talking. If you can talk sense to a train, there's no talking sense to it now. Like, it is gone. Like that opportunity is gone to say, oh, maybe we need to do something about Harry Kane, because, as you say, like, he got the goal, and I think that is all that's all that mattered. And you could see that in reaction. Now, Gareth Southgate isn't going to be judged by the media response to it necessarily, although I think he's probably, you know, there are certain aspects of how he deals with the media I think are almost overtly conscious of what people are saying, like the stuff yesterday, as he said before and after the game about, you know, thinking about his teammates from Euro 96 and, you know, the little thought he had. And, you know, he said this, hit his line beforehand about he can't provide closure for them. I was like, for fuck's sake, you missed a penalty 25 years ago. It's not like, this is not.
I think he said he saw Dave Seaman on the big screen.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's just, come on, like, it's not that. Honestly, like, it's a lie, because those players don't think like that about Gareth Southgate. They're not going. It's like when journalists ask players about a game, will you be thinking of, if Ireland are playing France, as asked some Irish player, will you be looking for revenge for the Henry handball? And footballers, they'd be looking at them going, what the fuck are you talking about? You know, that's not how we think. And that's not how footballers think. But I do think now, like, it was extraordinary. I agree with Phil. Like, I thought England were pretty terrible for a lot of the game yesterday. And it's one of those situations, once the victory comes, that the result makes sense of the whole thing. That suddenly it's like, look at this. And maybe there is a truth in that too, because the game lasts 90 minutes and you play the full 90 minutes, as Ryan says, and you use your substitutes. But at the same time, they were bad for a lot of it, and Harry Kane was terrible. And if then they are ifs, but if Muller had scored, if other things had happened, it would have been a very different game. But in tournament football, with a country, well, any country, we all get hysterical around tournament football. Then the results are the only thing that matters, and then it's like, we're just the bandwagon moves on, and I don't think there's any chance of there being any kind of Harry Kane conversation. I don't think Southgate would drop him anyway. Maybe some of the changes, I still think he's going to be very cautious. Like, will he think of Rice or Phillips on a yellow card? He might just look at that, but would he just think that that's almost like being a bit overconfident to say we're thinking about a semi-final? and I'll leave one of them out and play an attacking player because, if you go back, and this is like, I was thinking, England played Cameroon in 1990 in the quarterfinal, and they were already, that was a game they thought that they were going to actually, that was going to be a comfortable game at just a little stop off on the way to the semi-final. And that was one of those games that they probably were complacent going into. And I think Ukraine have some talented players who actually, if England don't do the things in so, kind of counter to what I've been saying, if they don't do some of the things they have been doing and working hard and closing players down, that they do have players who could actually hurt them.
Ryan, Jack Grealish can't do much more to get a start at this stage, can he? He's come on, another assist, and you can just see look, I'm going to go into Jack Grealish fanboy mode again here now. You can just see the stadium lift up. And I say this as just a football fan. I love watching him as a Liverpool fan. I don't care who he plays for. Well, maybe we're going to come on to the fact he might join City later on. I might have to change my view on that one. But, he's the type of player, whenever he gets the ball, you just hear the hum of the supporters, everybody getting off their seats, everybody getting excited. And again, he's delivered. He's delivered in a big way. That's 2 appearances now, 2 assists. Surely he must be getting his start soon.
You'd think so, like we talked about, with the level of opposition on paper at least dropping off a little bit from here up until hypothetically in the final, then there's no reason not to put him in there. And I think it all goes to show that Grealish is one of these players who kind of lives for the moment. I think he absolutely thrives being out there in front of a close to full Wembley Stadium, feeling the pressure. He's one of these players who plays with a smile on his face. There have been comparisons to Ronaldinho, which I think flatter him, of course. As a footballer, he's not quite there yet, but you can see where.
Who made that? Was that his mum? Was that his mum that said that one?
But in terms of a player who brings a smile, he's that sort of guy. He looks to entertain. I did a big piece on Jack Grealish for BBC Sport last year, where I spoke to a lot of his youth coaches, and they say he's always been this kind of person who. He's a leader in his own way. He kind of embraces the moment, and he'll put the team on his shoulders, and he's not afraid of the pressure moments. And I think that's shown. He's come into tight games, and he's provided a spark, kind of reliably so as well. You get the impression that when he's got the ball at his feet, he's going to make something happen, and he did. You saw the way he linked with Luke Shaw for the 2 goals at the end of the Germany game. Even after he came on, a couple of his touches didn't quite go for him. His head didn't drop. So I think he's got really kind of unshakable self-belief. And that's why he's a sort of player who I think is built for these tournaments, built for these kind of moments, and is someone that England should be relying upon, I think, and really looking to be the fulcrum of their attacking efforts. Because, like we've touched upon, that there hasn't been a great deal of creativity. It's not going to come from midfield when you're playing Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips as your 2 central players. So maybe it's got to come from somebody like Grealish dropping in and getting the ball to feet and looking to link and make things happen from there. Because Sterling's been wonderful, but he's at his best when he's being direct. He's running straight at players or running off the ball and looking to get in behind. And like we said, Kane has been somewhat of a disappointment so far. So to have someone who's a real reliable creative spark, who you can get the ball to them and then into their feet, and just know that they've got something about them and they can make something happen for you. I don't think you can ignore that for too much longer.
Yeah, I seen it was an interesting line from Paul Merson. He comes out with a few of them where he basically alluded to the fact that Jack Grealish was a big problem because if Southgate plays him and he plays well, then he gives him a headache that he doesn't really want. And I'm sitting there thinking, hold on, one of your players plays well, and therefore that then becomes a problem. It just was, it seems like he's not necessarily a Southgate type player. I think there's this perception within the England camp that maybe Southgate doesn't fancy him going the other direction. But for me, I'd be building a team around him and letting him do whatever role he wants, to be honest. And I think that's a misconception about Jack Grealish. I think he does work hard. Yeah. Villa are one of the top pressing sides in the league, and he certainly does pressure the ball. You don't want Jack Grealish running back towards his own goal, don't get me wrong, but certainly from an offensive pressing position, he's certainly strong in that area. Now, Phil, I want to come to you because I don't want this to become an England Euros show, because we've certainly got a lot of Irish viewers and I don't want to alienate them too
That's
much.
why we're talking about Jack Grealish, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, exactly. You're a brave man. Declan Rice is up next. No, but yeah, I think from your side, looking outside of obviously the England camp, who have been the big surprises for you, or who have been the kind of big standouts, whether that's from a team perspective or maybe some of the individuals that have stood out for you as well?
Well, we mentioned Ukraine. I'm surprised Ukraine have got this far. Even watching the game last night, you felt that if you were an England fan, you want to face Ukraine. Saw them in the group stage. Austria nullified them. Basically, Alaba did a job, and Yarmolenko. They rallied against the Dutch in the first game. Everyone in that group beat North Macedonia. So Sweden actually did them a favor when they beat Poland, that Ukraine got through. So I don't think Ukraine will cause too many problems for England if England have the right attitude. I had picked Denmark as a dark horse before the game. Irish fans know Denmark inside out, but they've got better. I just looked down the spine of the team. Obviously, Kjær has had a very good season for AC Milan. We know how good Kasper Schmeichel is. Højbjerg, he's a far more creative player with Denmark. He's actually created a lot of chances. He's in the top 6 of chances created after the group stage he was. And then obviously the bit of magic was Christian Eriksen. We all know what happened in the game against Finland. And I thought with that, I didn't know how Denmark would react, but it's galvanized them. They were so good against Wales. And if they beat the Czech Republic, I think they'll give England plenty of headaches in a semi-final. But see, the way this tournament is going, teams are picking each other off, where the Czechs could end up taking Denmark out. Not many people picked the Czechs to beat Holland the other day, but once De Ligt got sent off, that changed the whole game, and they were able to seal the deal. So Italy obviously were the standout team of the group stage. The fact that they're playing Belgium, that takes out one of the big guns. I said it's all coming up nicely for England to get to a final and probably play. You're going to be playing Italy, Spain, or Belgium. Switzerland could give Spain a few problems as well. They're obviously well organised. They've got this blonde-haired guy in midfield. Some Premier League clubs should sign a wand of a left foot. He's unrecognisable, Granit Xhaka. This is what international football does. Tournaments, players get moves.
Elage Juve syndrome, this, isn't it?
Elage Juve, Karl Boborski.
It's amazing how we always forget it, though, isn't it? Like
we get sucked in every single time.
Every time, like you're looking, God, that guy's good. Somebody's got to sign him. But like we forget every tournament.
Who's this Paul Pogba lad? This Paul Pogba lad.
Yeah, he's all right.
Yeah. So, obviously the other side of the draw for England is a lot tougher. If Belgium can get through Italy, that's a big if though, because obviously there's serious doubts over De Bruyne and Hazard. But if they were to get over them, then Hazard and De Bruyne are closer to full fitness, and Lukaku is in unbelievable form, and he's just, again, a player that would have been ridiculed for the way he played for Manchester United. His second touch was a tackle, that kind of thing was thrown at him. But when you see him running at defenders, it's frightening. And he showed in the Denmark game that he has the vision to pick a pass as well. So I think the way it's looking, you're looking at an England-Denmark semi-final. I find it really hard to pick between Italy and Belgium. And then I think Spain will get through that one. So, I had picked France as my team to win before the tournament, but they self-destructed the other night. Deschamps picked a horrible formation. There's talk that there was rows going on the pitch. That happens in football, but there was rows going on with player families and representatives in the stands as well. So just the French obviously believed that they were going to just turn up and win this tournament, and it hasn't happened. And it just means now is an opportunity for someone to go and make themselves heroes.
There's never a dull day, is there, within the French camp? It's like an episode of Desperate Housewives, that we used to be on years ago. There's always a soap opera. Dion, how about yourself? How do you kind of see it panning out? And it kind of feels like Phil says, it feels like the Spain-Belgium game could not Spain-Belgium, Italy-Belgium could quite comfortably be the final. They seem to be the teams for me that on paper have been the strongest. I think Italy have surprised us all with their offensive in how offensive that they've been. It's not really a throwback to the Italian teams of old. Where do you sit on this one? Who do you kind of see as your favourites?
I I would like. I think the winner of Italy Belgium, like that's a pretty obvious thing to say, but I would think the winner of that game is the most likely. But I do also think Denmark in a strange way are the most, not in a strange way at all. I think they're the most complete team there. Italy and Denmark, I think in their own ways are probably like two of the most cohesive teams in the competition. I like Phil says he thinks Czech Republic could cause a problem. I think the Czech Republic they beat Holland, okay, but I think they're a very, very ordinary team. But then there are a lot of ordinary teams, and it's actually like when we go back and we talk about the players who jump out and stand out, like that is one of the things. That is one of the reasons, I guess, because you are dealing with a lot of ordinary teams. And actually, just to go back to the Jack Grealish thing, I think that, and to bring an Irish kind of context into that as well, that is why this idea of focusing on what he can't do at international football is really stupid. Because look at Xhaka, look at these players. Like, you get more time, you get more room, you get opportunities in international football that you don't get in the Premier League. And like Ireland spent, Ireland were managed by Trapattoni and Martin O'Neill for 10 years, who were entirely focused on what players couldn't do. When someone like Wes Hoolahan could have just been running in international games for most of for years because of what he could do. And the same is true of Grealish. Like, you don't need in international football, enough mistakes will be made. There will be enough space that if you have a player like that, he will capitalize. And that's what you see all through the competition. I think on the other half, I think England will get by Ukraine. I agree with Phil. Like, I think Denmark are, as I said, I think they're a really, really strong team. I think Damsgaard has been excellent for them. From the Russia game on. And England, if they get through, like we've talked about it, like the hysteria will be so great at that stage, but that will be a really tough game for them. So I'm going to go, I think I'd say Italy. I think Italy might get just scrape through that, and I think I'll go for Italy overall. Anyone
different for you, Ryan?
I think I fancy Belgium to come through that one, but I think it will be dependent on how Hazard and De Bruyne are doing, because I think they both went off with injuries, didn't they, in the last game? So two of their most talented players. It was a really brutal game as well. That was a lot of challenges from particularly from the Portugal anyway. So Hazard was getting kicked all over the place, and I think they're going to bear the bruises of that into the next game or two. But talent-wise, Belgium has got so much quality in abundance there, and I think Phil touched on how great Lukaku has been. He's a real force who's come into his own the last year or two in Italy. Delivering on all the potential we saw in him in his early years in the Premier League. He's right up there with the best strikers in the world now. He'll take some stopping, even when he doesn't have a great game, or if he's not on the score sheet, he's got that ability to threaten in behind and just keep defenders occupied with his the nous of his movement and the physicality he brings and the quality that he brings. So I think they're going to take some stopping. I do like this Italy team. I've been very impressed by them. I think we all have. They look really, really well organised under Mancini, and they've got that bit of adventure to them. Spinazzola's look great. They've got 3 or 4 midfield players who look really great on the ball, are able to create chances. So they're a really well-rounded side. Look really impressive. They're the type of team who, if they come up against someone who aren't on their game for 90 minutes, they'll be able to expose that. But yeah, for me, I fancy Belgium to get through as long as the fitness levels of their best 2 or 3 players are there to get to, are going to be there for them. And then on the other end, I do think it's opening up for England. I have more faith in this England team than past England teams, even those of the so-called golden generation of the mid-2000s. I think it might be out of hope more than expectation, but for the first time in quite a long time, I just find them really likable. There are so many likable characters in this team. You kind of want to root for them. Where
that's a strange feeling, isn't it?
It is. It took me by surprise. I empathise with your thoughts earlier on when you were saying you kind of fell out of love with international football. England for so long were just boring and constantly failed to deliver on expectations. They can still be boring now. But there's always that capacity for a bit of magic with these vibrant young players who've got an attack. So, I do have quite a bit of faith in them, and it does feel strange.
Yeah, I do think for what it's worth, I think the draw is definitely opening up for England. I could see it being an England-Belgium final, and that could be a toss-up. I've just got a funny feeling that Southgate seems to be the type of manager that will I think I do that every single podcast. I think I turn myself on mute, or maybe it's people in the comments that want me to shut up and are turning me on mute. But for what it's worth, I've got a funny feeling it could be England, Belgium in the final, and that will be a toss of a coin. Now, moving on from the Euros, because there's a couple of interesting storylines that have been coming out on the domestic side of things that I want to get your opinions on, and I'm going to come to you first, Phil, because one of the stories, and it's two players that we've spoken about tonight already, and that is that Manchester City, off the back of Pep Guardiola revealing last season that they had no money to spend on strikers, now has put his hand down the back of the sofa and seems to have found some loose change, enough to potentially buy Harry Kane, and while he's at it, is after Jack Grealish for a rumoured 100 million. When you first read this stories, what did you make of it? Do you think there's something in it, and what was your reaction?
Yeah, I thought with Kane first, I mean, it's pretty obvious Kane wants to get away from Spurs. He's been there. He's come close to winning nothing. Okay, they got to the Champions League final. Incidentally, he should never have started that game, but he did. And I think Liverpool, when they saw his name in the team sheet, were quite happy that an unfit Harry Kane, it seems to be a pattern developing. We're talking about an unfit Harry Kane. And I wonder, would that worry Manchester City? But if he signed for Manchester City, all the chances they create, he's going to bang in 30 goals a season. Now, for all the money City have, they don't.
I think you could, Phil, to be honest. If you were playing up for City, some of the chances they create.
I don't know if you've ever seen me play. Grand in my own half, but once I get over the halfway line, nosebleeds. But look, we've seen what Pep Guardiola has done with Raheem Sterling. He's turned him into a goal scorer, and even his goal yesterday was the most Raheem Sterling-like goal, where he's in the middle and he can't really miss. And that you just think of the chances Harry Kane would get. But in terms of the price tag, obviously because he's an England international, now I wonder, is his price tag starting to just diminish a little bit with each performance? But City have never gone that big. They tend to spend, they buy players for 40 and 50 million. Sometimes they go up to 60, but they never go up to 100 million. And Levy, we know, is not the person you want to negotiate with. So you've got City who really want Harry Kane. You've got Spurs who don't want to sell him. So I just wonder, is he going to get priced out of a move away? And I kind of feel the same about Grealish. But I think Grealish is a different situation, where I think he really loves being at Villa. He's the local lad. He's the main man. Villa have money. Villa are investing. They're on the up. I mean, it did look like they were going to get some European football next season, but actually when Grealish got injured, the results started to fall off. But I don't think Grealish is that as desperate to get away from his club as Harry Kane is. You would imagine City would want to get at least one of them. I'd be very surprised if they got the two of them. But it's a fairly frightening prospect with the thoughts of the runaway Premier League champions bolstering their squad with players of that quality. And, a player we haven't even talked about, Ferran Torres, obviously has been in and out of the Spanish team at the Euros. He's the kind of player that Pep Guardiola has had a season to work with. And then he comes in next season and then starts banging in goals. That's what Guardiola can do with players.
Dion, where do you sit on this? Because it's interesting reading some of the comments and the sentiments in the chat around, the fact that if City keep buying these type of players, and I think Phil makes a great point. City traditionally seems to buy lots of £50 million players as opposed to that one or two kind of Galacticos, if you will. But there is concerns that with City continuing to strengthen and literally cherry picking two of the best players in the league, the Premier League could soon become like a Bundesliga, for example. Do you kind of share that viewpoint, or do you still think that, the likes of a Liverpool with players coming back, Manchester United now, rumoured to be signing Sancho, that deal looks to be done, and Chelsea, certainly with the new manager, look like they will be a force moving forward. Do you still think there's a lot of competition to be had in the league?
I think there's potentially a lot of competition, but I do think it's a real danger that Manchester City can dominate. I think for various reasons, that hasn't always been the case. But a lot of it has been down, up until last season, due to like an exceptional Liverpool side. Whether they can come back remains to be seen. Like after last season, if the players, that is still a big if. Chelsea potentially. I still think United have quite a way to go if they want to challenge. And I look at the Harry Kane thing though. At the same time, I would think Spurs should take that 100 million if it's going. Like, we're talking about how he's played in this tournament. We're talking about how international tournaments actually give you an opportunity because of the weakness of some of the teams, and you're looking at Harry Kane, who is struggling through the tournament. So I think Daniel Levy, I think sometimes Daniel Levy maybe has actually the most overrated reputation in football for getting, he's made some really bad decisions recently. And I think he could redeem himself by taking whatever, taking 100 million if he can get it from City, taking that. And I would be, and if they can get Grealish, they would be a really strong side then. But I think it will be interesting with Harry Kane, because he isn't a Guardiola type of player, and you look at how Aguero kind of muscled his way into Guardiola's kind of thoughts, and he was never really the player that Guardiola sees as being part of what he believes football it should be. And I wonder, he's not going to sign. Well, would he sign Harry Kane, and then would he play him all the time, or would he have him as the Aguero replacement for good and for bad, if you like? But I would, if I was Tottenham, if I was Daniel Levy, I'd be thinking this is too good a deal to turn down.
There's two other things that have come out, and you've touched on Daniel Levy, and Ryan, I'm going to come to you on this one. Is the news that Rafa Benitez today has been named the Everton manager, and the Blues tried to sweep this one under the carpet last night when England were playing, and kind of release the news and hope nobody would notice. Unfortunately, didn't quite work. And I've got a blue half of the family and a red half of the family, and the blue half of the family are not best pleased, shall we say. What was your reaction when you heard the news that Rafa Benitez was potentially in line to be one of the options, and then ultimately the reaction that followed, and now the fact that the club have ignored that reaction from their fan base and ultimately appointed him anyway?
I don't think any of it's a great surprise, really. I think what a lot of clubs are finding, I know it wasn't Everton's choice to lose their manager, but a lot of the clubs who've changed manager this summer rather, so Spurs, Palace, and now with Ancelotti leaving, those clubs have found it difficult to find a manager, not just an upgrade, but on the level of the one they've let go in many ways. I think that the market for these sort of, without wishing to be disrespectful, are kind of mid-range clubs, not the elite of the elite, the clubs who are just a notch below that, or aspiring to to climb.
You're going to get me in trouble with the blue side of my family now. Thanks,
mate. But clubs, let's call them aspirational clubs. Clubs who are looking up and
like
wanting to climb the ladder. I think they're finding it difficult to find a real good fit for them and their ambitions. And Spurs have struggled terribly, haven't they? And I do wonder whether Benitez, as great as his record is and the trophies he's got on his CV, whether he can still be considered at the forefront of modern coaching. I think he did well at Newcastle, but that was in a very specific set of circumstances where they were very much the underdogs, and anything above scraping survival for that club with the way they were being run was going to be seen as a great bit of work, and he did through the organisation he brought to them, and which is is what he does, is what he can still do to a very high level. Then he did some really good work, but is that going to be enough for Everton? Is somebody coming in, making them defensively resolute, but who perhaps doesn't have the same kind of tactical chops we're seeing at the top end of the managerial spectrum these days? Will that satisfy them and where they're going to go? I'm not so sure it will. I think regardless of who he's managed before, regardless of the fact that he's spent a lot of time across Stanley Park, if you look at him just purely as a manager and his CV, maybe 10 years ago or so, it would have been a really great progressive signing, a sign of ambition. But I think that time has probably passed a little bit. And I think just like players kind of weighing towards the end of their career, we see it with managers too, that their ideas become a little bit stale. And I do worry that Benitez is in that kind of phase now, whereby the top end of the coaching, the elite of the elite have passed him by a little bit. So I do wonder just how well this is going to work for all parties, really.
Yeah, Phil, I think the one thing that's kind of come out of a lot of the stuff that's been posted on social media, particularly from an Everton side, is that they're ultimately not happy. But from a Liverpool side, it's been a strange reaction. I mean, some are massively supportive of Benitez and nearly wanting him to do well, which I'll be honest, I find a little mad. I mean, I'm a massive Rafa fan for what he did to the club, what he done for the city, the support that he's shown local charities, the Hillsborough Justice campaign. He's been a fantastic servant to the club and to the city. I have a fundamental problem with him going to Everton, though. Something just doesn't sit right for me, and it feels like he's tarnished his reputation with, a large section of the supporters. What do you think?
Well, I think he might tarnish it if he does a good job at Everton. But this news broke, say this was leaked 3 weeks ago. This is like a classic politician behavior where they leak out things, see what kind of reaction it gets, and it got a terrible reaction. Somebody put a banner outside his house. Now, I would never condone that kind of behavior. And Everton have still gone ahead with it. And it's not as if Rafa Benitez is in his prime, where, this is the hottest ticket in town. You got to get this guy. He is the future of football. They could have got other managers. They could have gone down widen the talent search and get a younger manager and build something. Benitez is going to set them up very defensively, but also he has to hit the ground running straight away. He's swimming against the tide already, and he needs to start winning games straight away. Phil Jagielka, the former Everton captain, was on TV today saying the exact same thing, where he's already going in there and there's fans that want him to fail. So, which is a horrible position to be in as a supporter of a club where you don't agree with the managerial appointment and you're looking for failure from day one. Now, true Everton fans would say you support any manager at the club, but that's not the way football works. It's going to be very hard for a lot of Everton fans to look at Rafa Benitez and not think of what he did at Liverpool. He was just across the road, won the Champions League, won the FA Cup, obviously came very close to winning the Premier League. But in terms of Rafa Benitez, it didn't surprise me that he took the job. He obviously had a spell in charge of Chelsea as well. So he lives quite nearby. It makes perfect sense for him. He's going to have funds to invest. He didn't really always get that with Newcastle. But a 3-year contract, I don't know how long he lasts.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be an interesting one. And like you said, if you've got fans that want you to fail before a ball's been kicked, imagine, with fans being back as well in Goodison, it's not going to be a nice place for Rafa if the games or results go against him. Dion, another club that has been in the news today, and we were asked a couple of questions around it in the chat, is our reaction to the news that Tottenham have finally found themselves a manager. It feels like they've interviewed every man and his dog at this stage for the role, and they finally appointed the former Wolves manager. What's your thoughts on that appointment? And if you're Harry Kane, looking at the mess that is that football club at the moment, surely you're looking to get out the door pretty quick.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's that. It's not that exciting an appointment even for Tottenham. I don't think like anyone who watched Wolves last season certainly wouldn't be like excited at the prospect of what Spurs are going to be, how Spurs will look this season. So I don't think it's it does just reek of a shambles that began really with the appointment of Mourinho. Like, let's, if you want to say Pochettino leaving, although there was probably some argument for that at that stage, given the way his methods had sort of worn the players down. But like from the moment Mourinho was appointed, I think it's been just a calamity for Tottenham. And I don't think this appointment is really going to do anything to kind of get them back to where they were under Pochettino.
Yeah, it seems like, from a Liverpool fan's perspective, I'm looking at some of the clubs around us, and I'm quite happy to see turmoil, to be perfectly honest, and I see maybe I'm alone in this, but Manchester United getting Jadon Sancho doesn't necessarily scream the fact that it fixes some of their long-standing issues. From a Liverpool perspective, you see the likes of Everton bringing in a manager that the fans aren't happy with. It's kind of nice, Phil, for Liverpool to they do their business under the radar. There doesn't seem too much negativity around the club at the moment. And usually when Liverpool are pretty quiet on the transfer fronts, that's when Michael Edwards pulls a little rabbit out of the hat. How are you feeling about where Liverpool are at the moment, and ultimately what the rest of the summer will bring?
Well, just talking about the likes of Everton and Spurs and the managerial appointments, Liverpool are just lucky to have one of the best managers in the league. I mean, we talked about Pep Guardiola, Manchester City being a bit of a runaway train. The fact that Liverpool, the way I kind of feel going into every season is Manchester City should win the league every season. The fact that Liverpool beat them and they brought them to the last day of the season tells everything you need to know about Jurgen Klopp and just what an amazing job he's done at Liverpool. But, we spoke about this last week just in terms of what they need to do, and haven't changed my mind. I think the midfield is definitely, Gini Wijnaldum has to be replaced. And Renato Sanchez was a player that came up last week. And again, he was very impressive in Portugal's defeat to Belgium. And he's a different type of player to Wijnaldum, but he's also a replacement. And he gives you that. It's obviously, you've seen how hard he is to knock off the ball, which is a quality that Wijnaldum has. But also Sanchez has a fairly decent shot on him as well, and he fits that age profile. And then you're looking at somebody into the front three, because the options have to be stronger. We're talking about players that have done okay at the Euros, someone like Shaqiri, but he's shown that he's not really a viable option to be a starter for Liverpool. You've obviously got the famous front three now. You've got Jota as part of that. Does Harvey Elliott come back in? And then you need something stronger in there as well, whether it's a young player that can be developed. You look at what Leicester did today. They signed Daka from RB Salzburg. That's a great signing. A 22-year-old who has absolutely banged in goals in the Austrian Bundesliga. People say, well, it's not the highest standard, but look at the last prolific striker that Salzburg had, Erling Haaland. He's doing all right. I'm not comparing Daka and Haaland, but they definitely need to midfield and in attack. I think we said maybe one more defender just to be safe. But yeah, I think Liverpool will just, having the fans back, but also having the likes of Virgil van Dijk back will just make things a lot more pleasant going into next season.
Definitely. No, I know we're over the hour, so we'll bring it to a close there, lads. Because as I said to you off air, and I'm going to get grief in the comments for this, my missus is waiting to watch Love Island with me after this. And as I said to the lads, and Dion rightly pointed out, there's no football on tonight, so you just gotta play the game, because I know that I'm going to be in the doghouse when the football is back. So it's a necessary evil. What I would say, just to finish on the Liverpool transfers, I would much rather Liverpool go about their business quietly. I don't want the papers and the news outlets knowing ultimately who we're going to be after, who we're in talks with. I know that fans can sometimes get restless when they see other clubs making signings, but Liverpool and their board and their transfer committee have done a lot of good over the last few years, and I think they've certainly earned their stripes. And I'd be confident come the end of the summer, Liverpool will be in a strong position. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Now, lads, before we wrap up, I just wanted to thank you all for your time today. On Phil, Ryan, thank you for your time. A big thank you to everybody in the chat for your brilliant comments, as always. If I can ask a quick favor of everybody, if you can just like the video quickly, and also leave a comment underneath the video. Let us know who you've enjoyed watching in the Euros, who's been your standout, who's let you down, who do you think is going to win it. Any engagement with the video at all will help spread the word, so please do get involved. Before we go, Ryan, you've got a new book that's coming out shortly, The Dream Factory, which takes us inside the world of football academies. Tell the listeners a little bit about your book and where they can find it.
Yeah, thank you. So, like you said, it's called The Dream Factory, inside the make or break world of football's academies. I've spent the last couple of years visiting academies all up and down English football, from the top of the top. So the likes of Liverpool, Man City, Man United, speaking to all the key figures there, all the way down to the lower league levels and non-agency, and or how they all operate. The premise of the book is basically to take a look at this emerging generation of young England players, so the Fodens, the Alexander-Arnolds, the Rashfords, the Sanchos, and looking at how they've been developed, but also at what cost. So that's both the financial cost and also the very human cost, and the attrition rates that we see, and all the devastation that can be caused by a system that sucks in 12,000 young people and spits most of them out pretty unceremoniously. And there's a lot of Liverpool interest there for the Liverpool fans. There's very specific details of how Trent Alexander-Arnold was developed. I spoke with Neil Critchley and Michael Beale and several other people who've had really hands-on experience with Trent in his development. So you learn all about how he was kicking balls all the way across the academy pitches when he was frustrated when he was first learning how to become a right back, and how they got buy-in from him on that process. And then just generally how Liverpool operate and how they do things in quite a unique way and quite a pioneering way in many respects. So yeah, it's all in there, and it's available on the 5th of August. But please, if it sounds of interest to you, you can pre-order it now. So please check it out.
Fantastic. I'll definitely be doing that now. With that, lads, it's Love Island time for me. So I hope you've all enjoyed the show. Make sure you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will be back with you again next Wednesday on the Midweek Fix. All the best.